What if my ex meets someone else and treats them better than they treated me? It's a really, really common question that I get from my clients, and I completely understand. At the outset, it can seem really scary. And so here are a couple different perspectives that might be helpful. The first one I think might be received well. The second might feel a little bit harsh at first, but it really is intended to empower you. So when we're talking about people who have attachment wounds, which is the vast majority of the client relationships that I am working with, I am working usually with someone who has a more anxious leaning attachment wound, although I do work with avoidance and fearful avoidance as well. And they were in a relationship most commonly with someone else who had an attachment wound. And part of this is because secure people will usually recognize that there is something systemically not working about the relationship and that the conflict isn't particularly healthy, and they'll usually leave the relationship. So you usually get two insecure attachment styles together. And the reason that this is important is because just from a scientific, data-driven perspective, you can make a pretty good argument that if your ex does not go and do the very hard, deep, vulnerable, consistent, appropriate, correct work in order to rewire their brain and their nervous system, because remember, they can't willpower and wish their way out of their behaviors. None of us can when we're talking about things that are deep in our programming and deep in our nervous system, because when we get activated, we switch from our parasympathetic rest and digest mode into sympathetic fight or flight. And so you're not in a conscious conversation with yourself or with the other person. So on a conscious level, you can do everything that you can try everything possible to talk yourself out of behaving in a different way. But when push comes to shove, if you get triggered, then it's sort of like going to become the wild, wild west, no matter how much you talk to yourself in your conscious brain, if that makes sense. So if your ex is dating someone else, or they do start to date someone else, it is true that they will probably have a honeymoon with that person like they had with you, where dopamine will be high and the mask hasn't dropped and they haven't been activated into their fight or flight, freeze, fawn. And it may seem hunky-dory. And also what's true is that almost inevitably they will end up in a power struggle, and that is where they won't have those tools unless they've done that kind of work, and the likelihood that it will dissolve is very, very high. So that is the scientific perspective that feels pretty good to hear, and again, I feel quite confident in that when that's what we're talking about. However, once we draw that more logic-driven conclusion, then somehow your ex has the magic pill to wake up and be a completely different person, we actually need to set that argument aside, because if we cling to that argument, they can never be healthy with anyone. They can never be healthy with anyone. Well, there are exceptions to the rule, or they go and do the work, or whatever it may be, or you just see data on social media that tells a different story, even though it may not actually be a different story behind the scenes. Your brain will go haywire. Your heart will break over and over again, because you've decided that the only way that you can heal is by needing this story to be true, that they can't be in a healthy relationship with anyone. We can't need that story in order to heal, because it is a house of cards. And if one gets pulled, what we think our entire healing journey is reliant on goes away. Thus, the real magic pill in all of this is to be able to practice getting comfortable with saying, I am my number one advocate, I am my number one fan, and regardless of how they are theoretically treating someone else, they didn't treat me well. And that's what matters to me here, okay? And we have to sever this faulty, broken math equation that you're therefore supposed to go fix yourself, or it means there's something wrong with you because they didn't treat you well, because that's just not how it works, okay? Two last quick things. What does it say about their character if they treat one person better than another because they think that they're more compatible with that person? If you have your ex on a pedestal, what does that information tell you about the way that they operate in the world? The last thing is, I can do a separate video on this, There isn't a world in which you taught them how to be secure just by modeling healthy behavior or even introducing them to healthy conflict behavior and communication in the relationship. You may have a fear that what if I taught them how to be healthy? Tell me if you want me to do a video on that, and I can't. I mean, I can, but go back to the beginning of this video where we're talking about the nervous system. Your answer is in there.